Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the latest episode of House of League. I'm James Smales. I'm joined, as always, by our Rugby League editor, Matt Shaw, and unfortunately, as it's become a habit, by Josh McAllister, rocking his pretty green top.
Why are you on this show every week?
That's what the people want.
It's what the people want.
My mum enjoys watching me on YouTube every week.
I nearly swore then. We're nearly starting the show again.
There's
It's a family show.
There's lots to go at this week, so we'll park the picking on Josh for now. But I'm sure it'll crop up as we discuss some key talking points throughout the show. And the one thing that we want to look at this week is we want to look at the playoff race, but how that impacts all the different clubs that are currently in that. And what really sparked this debate, if you will, that we're about to have for me was looking at the league table, looking at the fixtures coming up for the likes of Warrington, looking at where Warrington are in the table, and basically just asking the question of, are they out of it now? And if they are we looking at a 7-team competition to get into the top 6 at the end of the season? I'm just going to lay quickly for you two. I'm sure people listening and watching, they can access the league table themselves. But so obviously we've got KR at the top on 28 points and Wigan on 24. Lee now third on 21. Leeds on 20 in fourth. Then it's St Helens 18 points, FC 17, Wakefield 16, and then a big drop of 4 points to Warrington on 12, Catalan on 10, Castleford on 8, Giants 4, Salford 2. Let's forget that bottom 4. I think we can forget Catalan as well. So at the minute it's 8 teams, but are Warrington genuinely in it? Debate. Go for it.
Right, I think as much as, in case people didn't know, I've said all along Warrington won't make the playoffs this year.
Have you said that?
I told you so. You know what? I've got to be honest. When they lost to Huddersfield, I said I've got a lot of bookmarked tweets when I was getting slagged off for saying they all got light this weekend. So anyway, by the by, I still think they are in it, but they have to win this week because they play Hull FC.
Yeah.
Hull FC, if they obviously win, go 2 further in front. St Helens, who are
which would open 7 point,
and Hull FC are a point above Hull FC, but they play Salford, so they're likely to win. So they're going to be 7 points behind if they lose to Hull FC this week.
Yeah.
With 13 games to go. Now that is retrievable because we saw Lee do something similar last year. However, I don't think Warrington are a good enough side consistently to do that. They have to win this week because after this they play Salford, Catalan, Castleford.
Yes.
3 games that I don't think they're guaranteed to win the way they're playing and the way they are as a team, but 3 games they certainly could win. If they were to beat Hull FC and knock off 4 wins on the bounce, they're right back in the mix.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think they're out of it, but I think they're absolutely on the brink of being out of the race if they lose this
and
week.
it's key this weekend.
Yeah, well, Hull FC are 6th, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it's for Warrington, it is an absolute 4-pointer that they can't afford to lose. I think we're at that. I think the first time all season I've said we're at must-win territory.
I almost felt like that against Huddersfield. You just, with the way Huddersfield form, having only won 1 all season, obviously they ran Wigan close. You thought for Warrington to keep that pressure on the top 6, they had to win at Huddersfield, and they were rubbish. They were miles behind it. And Sam Burgess said after the game that they're a team that are lacking in confidence. Now that's 2 defeats after the Challenge Cup final. Obviously that can take out of you, but Hull have gone the other way.
Don't buy this confidence thing, Josh.
I'm only just telling you what Sam Burgess said.
If they were so low in confidence, why did they play so well at Wembley?
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the best that we've seen them.
When you absolutely, if you were short of confidence, that's where you would cave.
That's where you get found out.
Yeah,
at Wembley.
And that was the best performance of the season.
The final defeat could have knocked all that confidence out of them, but they weren't going well before them, were they?
I just don't buy it, Josh, because that, even though they lost, to me, that should have been a confidence builder. We were all saying that should be the start of their season. Sam Burgess himself said, this should be the platform.
The fans were all saying that.
Absolutely.
In your Twitter thread, they were all saying, this is the baseline, now watch us go.
Absolutely. And the complete, I'll tell you what I think, and I've spoken to people who have a better understanding of what's going on there than I do, and they share the same opinion to me. The group is inconsistent as people, and when you're inconsistent as people, you're inconsistent as players. And I think that's exactly what we see. They can turn up, but they can also be, You know it as in yourself. If you're inconsistent as a person in your habits and stuff, you can have a good day at work, then you can have a bad day at work. I think that's what Warrington are. I wouldn't say every single individual, but I think too many are like that. And that's why we see the occasional good performance, but we see too much of. I mean, that was rubbish. Was the word? They were rubbish.
They were rubbish.
And yeah, you watched it for us. The worry for them, for my part, is they're at home. Against Hull FC this week, rather than going to the MKM Stadium where Hull FC can't buy a win. But away from home, Hull FC have already knocked off Wigan, should have beaten Leeds, been to Catalan and won, although quite a lot of teams have now been over there to Catalan and won. But my point being, FC play well away from home. They'll go there and FC will be the favourites to win that game.
Well, the biggest thing there is FC have already gone to Warrington this year and won earlier this season. So yeah, as Matt alluded to earlier, it's a massive game for Warrington, a must-win game. I mean, supporters were leaving against Huddersfield after about 65 minutes. Now that wasn't all of them, of course, but they were leaving and just they didn't like what they were seeing, and I'll say it again, they were rubbish, and they're struggling a little bit with injuries. So you have to mention that Matt Duffy's out at the minute, so that he's one of their brightest sparks in attack alongside George Williams, who had to do too much, or was trying to do too much in the first half, and then wasn't really there in the second half. So they have had their injuries, and obviously 3 ACL injuries. Matty Ashton, who's the star winger, the England international, he's out for the season. I think they could do with recruitment-wise. I think they could do with an extra outside back, a winger. Toby King was on the wing on the weekend, and he's just not a winger. I think Sam Burgess said that they've got some salary cap space available, and I think they need a winger. With every credit to the young Thulis, Jake Thulis, I think it's a lot of pressure to put on him if he has to play week in, week out now. Obviously, they've got Josh Thulis as well who can go back to the wing, but I think they need to look in the recruitment for an outside back.
I do want to touch on Josh's point about injuries. They've lost the best explosive wide man, arguably the best hooker in the comp, certainly last year in Danny Walker, and Duffy. You know, they've lost 3 important players there, and that would hurt any team.
They were without George Williams for quite a substantial amount of time. So Max Snead came in, but then got injured. There
is some context in there that I think is important to point out, because we would point it out with any other team. I think it's hard to buy into it too much, Warrington, because of we know even without them, they can play way better than they are doing, as we saw when they beat Lee in the semi-final. You know, they were great without key players. And then, you know, the other point, it's just the same things with Warrington, the recruitment. How often have we spoke about it? The latest one, Dan Russell, you know, they brought him in for Matty Nicholson, which never felt like an adequate replacement. Within 4 months, he's gone. You know, he's at Salford now on loan for the rest of the season. They just don't seem. They seem to, for a club as big as they are and as good as they are, because it's a great club. Like off the field, I know at the minute there's a lot of disillusion among the supporters, because it feels like, despite not going well on the field, there's all the gimmicks going on off the field. But commercially, the club does fantastically well. So, you know, it's hard to be critical of that. But for a club the size of Warrington and with the aspirations of Warrington, the recruitment, particularly overseas, is just so hit and miss and not good enough for where they need to be.
So Matt says this weekend's key. It's crunch time. You sharing that? Do you think they've still got a really good chance? Do you think they've gone? Where are you at with it?
No, I think it's also crunch time. I think they need to win this one to keep pressure on the top 6. I think if they beat Huddersfield, there would have been a little bit less pressure, but because they lost there and Huddersfield gained only their second win of the season, I think the pressure's mounting on Sam Burgess and his side.
Okay, just moving on a little bit, in what I genuinely think is a really fascinating playoff race. We talk about injuries, and you look at the amount of injuries that Warrington have had, and you put that in another team, I don't know, St Helens as an example, there's no chance you're going to go start winning games against teams like Leeds Rhinos when you've got that many injuries. There's literally no chance.
I was about to call out your nonsense there and then realise what you were
smart.
doing.
Yeah. I was not practiced that either.
Well played, the St Helens media team that clipped last week's prediction show.
I'm looking at you.
And had you two's faces out there.
We did get a plug in the comments.
Yes. No.
Forgive them.
Big hello to Tom and everyone at St Helens. Joking aside, what a brilliant performance and effort in real face of adversity, and we've questioned St Helens this season. We've questioned some of Port Welland's decisions. We've questioned some of the performances, but we've seen sporadically a little bit, but we've certainly seen it building over the last few weeks. It feels like they're getting somewhere, and this is what fascinates me about this playoff race. Now, all of a sudden, St Helens are in 5th place. They're on 18 points. Leeds have got a really tough game against Lee this week, and if Lee win that, which they're more than capable of, St Helens will leapfrog Leeds and go 4th. And then all of a sudden, everything that they've had going on, and all the backlash and all the little bit of tit for tat that happened that quickly got brushed under the carpet between, fans and well-earned some of the players, all the injuries and everything else, they're a top 4 team, and it's then in their hands to finish there and even kick on and get top 3. That's, I don't think we're making enough of a song and a dance over how good an achievement that is, given what they've been through this season.
It's bizarre given the criticism that they've had. They were probably under the pump, probably the most out of all clubs.
Yeah.
Salford
around Magic weekend, it felt toxic.
Yeah. It's really bad.
But as you say, their position in the playoffs, I mean, you compare it to Warrington. We were speaking to about Warrington more now. They didn't get as much pressure from the fans as St Helens did earlier in the season. And against Leeds, they were just really good. They just defended so well. I mean, the highlight was Harry Robertson's chase back on Ryan Hall, and then I think
that was sensational.
It was sensational.
That's one of the players of the season.
Yeah. 100%.
The best thing about that wasn't that alone. There was 4 or 5 teammates, St Helens teammates, also tracking back to push him over, and I think George Delaney, a prop forward, was one of them. I mean, they came together and put on a performance. Leeds were pretty poor themselves. Brad Arthur wasn't happy with the way they went into the game, but every credit to St Helens. Yeah, they were brilliant.
I think obviously they didn't look like losing in that, as the game wore on. But even let's say if they had, when supporters are seeing them sort of efforts from the players, that goes a long, long way, especially when you're really under the pump with injuries and things like that. You see the players turning up for the club, for the supporters, for themselves, for everyone like that. That buys you so much, just as a club, in terms of support and goodwill. And I really feel like that unity, it can really take them somewhere. And as they do get a few people back later in the year, who knows what this St Helens side can do. I'm not saying they're up there as one of the best sides. They're not, but
I'm not buying into this. The fans appreciate efforts like that.
They should do.
I'm not saying they don't. What I'm saying is I think that's always been there with this Saints side. When in this run of however long it's been of the fan dissatisfaction, I don't think there's been a lack of effort or lack of players like that. It's mainly been they're just not as good as they were.
Yeah.
And they're not as good as they were. One win doesn't change that. I think this win is significant because we've got this big stat about they've not beat any of the top teams, and it's like 0 from 18, and technically it still stands because the records against like Hull KR, Wigan, Lee and Warrington, Leeds weren't involved. Yeah. But let's be right, Leeds are one of the best teams in the comp this year.
Yeah.
Behind Wigan and KR, for me, the best team in the comp, and they've beat them, and they beat them comfortably. That is a big win. That shows what they're capable of. And I think we had this conversation off record and what you alluded to at the top. Warrington, Saints without Wellesby, and there's loads out, aren't there? Loads and loads and loads out. Not many teams would be capable of beating Leeds with that many injuries.
No.
That's the thing with Saints. They're still, not at the peak of the powers. No one's suggesting they are. But they're still a dangerous team. They're still capable of beating anyone. As regular as before, no, but they're still there or thereabouts. Yeah. But I don't think we should get too carried away with it. Also, don't think credit where it's due, and the section of that supporter base who have been, overly harsh, and maybe just respect what they've done.
Yeah, but this is why I find it so fascinating. And I agree with you, and Josh probably does, and a lot of people will, that Saints are not one of the best 3 teams, probably not even one of the best 4 teams. You'd probably put Lee in front of them.
Yeah.
But they could sit in 3rd place in a couple of weeks, certainly could sit in 4th by the end of this weekend, which is why so fascinating, and moving it on brings me to the next one. Zach Hardacre speaking to the lesser spotted Dan Tomlinson, and doing a piece this week talking about how Hull FC feel that they're a top 6 side, but also on their day genuinely feel that they're a top 4 team. Now, having seen some of them FC performances, I would agree that they've performed at times, only a few times, but at times this season, to the level of a top 4 team. Are they a top 4 team? No. But on their day, they could perform to that level. If they got in the playoffs, they have got it in them to go and beat a Lee or the Leeds in a one-off game.
Agree. However, this is
Probably
probably
going to say something that he doesn't buy into again.
This is probably the no. I agree with Zach Hardacre. I think they have performed like a top 6, and on the day have performed like a top 4. However, I think the difference between Hull FC and the other teams they're competing with, they're also capable of performing like a bottom 3 side.
Yes,
as proven by the fact they've lost to Castleford and Huddersfield. Huddersfield's only other victories come against Warrington this week. Castleford have beat Salford twice, and they beat Huddersfield. So Hull FC are the...
Oh, when they play bad, I mean, they've thrown in some stinkers.
So, yes, I agree with Zach Hardacre, but I think that ignores the fact that they're still capable of a very poor performance. Well,
it's that unpredictability that I love about
that if they made
these playoffs.
And if they made the 6, they could... I don't think they're good enough to beat Hull KR, and I know they beat Wigan, but I think Wigan in a playoff... I don't think they're good enough to beat Wigan in a playoff game. They beat them in a Challenge Cup game, though, so maybe.
Yeah, knockout.
But I think after that, yeah, they could have a run in the playoffs. If they made it.
Well, that was going to be my question, and probably know your answer, so I'm going to come to Josh first. Do you think they've got... Well, obviously they've got a shock because they're in 6th at the minute, Josh, but do you fancy them to squeeze into the 6? Given the fact that at the minute they're holding Wakefield out of it, who have just on the back of beating Wigan and look good home and away now. And Warrington, who we said, have got FC this week and then a very favourable run of games.
Yeah, they're definitely capable, aren't they? It's just all about that consistency in the last few games, and the big one coming this weekend. That'll that could be a big turning point in making that top 6. They've got the capabilities. They've got the squad. Again, they've got players out. John Asiata's out. Will Price is out. 2 influential players who are to return and be a huge boost for the rest of their season. So, yeah, I think they've got every chance of making that top 6. I wouldn't disagree at all. I don't think, as Matt says, that they have enough to compete with the likes of Wigan and Hull KR when it comes to later. But the fact that we're even just talking about Hull FC in this picture compared to where they were 12 months ago, 16 months ago, is unbelievable for them.
Yeah.
I think it's a toss. I've said, and we'll get onto it in a minute, I think Wakefield will make the 6. I think the last spot is a toss-up between Hull FC and St Helens.
Okay. Well, let's come on to Wakefield now. I mean, we sat here last week. I don't know what you two said. I clearly remember what I said in that I backed Wigan. No, I'm not backtracking here. I did back Wigan, but I said I should have actually gone back and watched it. I'm pretty certain we said if we're sat here next week and Wakefield have won, I don't think we'll be shocked.
No, I think we did.
And I don't think
because I think Matt said
any of us are shocked, are we? Because Wigan have had that performance in them, and no, I don't want to take anything away from Wakefield. Wakefield have had that performance in them.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a shock at all.
I think you said that you wouldn't be like, it's not a surprise now if Wigan had that back to back. Obviously, they only just overcame Huddersfield. You thought it wouldn't be no surprise to see 2.
It felt like I felt like they were going to get caught out at some point because they've just not been playing as well as they can.
Yeah,
and there are too many good teams in the comp that, Wakefield being a prime example, if they play well, are capable of beating them. So, not a massive shock, but at the same time, let's not understate the significance of that result for Wakefield. Team in the Championship last year, have come in, have done wonderfully well. We spoke highly about them all year. They've got a lot of players who hadn't really been tested at this level, passed with flying colours. And in terms of the top 6 race, that's a huge result for them. Let's not forget on Wakefield, they've still got the bottom 3 to play 5 times.
Yeah.
In the last 12 games. So nearly half of their matches left against the bottom 3 teams.
Yes.
They're going to make the playoffs, smells like.
But huge for them in terms of momentum, because if they don't win that, then the 3 points behind FC going to Hull Kingston Rovers on Friday night that could be then 5 points. I mean, they could just as easily win at Hull Kingston Rovers. It's less, but it's ifs and buts. But for momentum, it felt so huge, Josh, and really, really deserved, because it kind of underlined what I think we've said countless times on this show throughout the season. The great progress that they're making on and off the field as a club. The town must be buzzing at me, because it feels like they've really got something there.
Absolutely. The whole club will be buzzing. And in terms of momentum and in terms of confidence, if you can turn up and do a job over Wigan, the historic Grand Slam champions, they'll have belief that they'll go into Hull KR believing that they can beat the Challenge Cup winners, believing for the rest of the season that they can beat anyone in front of them and make the top 6. Yeah, Darryl Powell deserves all the praise there. And again, another club that's currently without a lot of star players, a lot of the forwards. And they went into that Wigan game without Mike McMeekan, their number one prop.
Their best 2 props are Mike McMeekan and Caleb Hamlin-Uele. I know Fertilli's getting a lot of praise, but they're the best 2. Never played. They haven't had Truman for the majority of the season. They're great. They're great. They play great brand of rugby.
Yeah, they're a joy to watch.
They really are. They're probably the most attractive team on the eye, I'd argue.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on Wigan. We're not making a big deal on them, I don't think, because we know they can turn it on when it matters most.
Yeah.
We know when it comes to later on in the year.
Yeah. Look, we
saw it last year.
In the last 2 seasons, they've had stages of the season where they've wobbled a bit, haven't they?
Last year they had a loss against Leeds, Hull FC, and there was someone else around July time. So it's just come a little bit earlier, and then they know how to switch it on, and they will. There'll be no panic.
My only concern for Wigan is, and we spoke about this a bit, they just look a bit blasé now they're playing. They
definitely did against Huddersfield.
Yeah, there's just that intensity's dropped a little.
Going through the motions a little bit.
Yeah, it feels very much like they're in second gear, which is a good thing in the sense of
there's more to come.
But if you get into a habit of playing in second gear,
yeah, you've got to be able to find that switch to.
And we know they can, because they went the only team to beat KR this season.
Yeah,
so they can. But I don't know.
Matt Pete did say the intensity of that Wakefield game will do his side good.
Yeah.
Reading between the lines, that might mean that they know now that they've got to switch it on, because otherwise you're going to...
Well, it's going to take a braver person than probably the 3 of us to start writing off.
Oh, no.
Absolutely not.
I'd still go back to the treble debate we had about KR.
Well, that brings me... Let's wrap this bit up here. And what I want you both to do is to give me your top 6 in order. Matt, you go first.
In order?
In order from first, starting at top. Give me first to 6th.
Absolute pressure.
Right,
with
No.
Okay. After this weekend, I will go Hull KR top, because they're playing so consistently well, and Wigan aren't. Even though Wigan could well beat Hull KR,
they're 4 points clear,
and the points difference.
Yeah,
so I'm going Hull KR top, Wigan second. I'm going Leeds third. I think Lee are a better team than Leeds when both play at the best, but Leeds are far more consistent. Like, that looks like an off performance for them against Saints, where Lee are all over the shop. Lee 4th, Wakefield 5th, St Helens 6th.
I think I agree with that. I think maybe I'd swap Saints to 5th, Wakefield 6th. Hull FC would be just in the outside 7th. But I think I agree. Leeds 3rd, Lee 4th. Hull KR at the top, given that they play Wigan one more time in August, but that even if Wigan win, there's still 2 points there. It's firmly in Hull KR's hands.
Right, and now let's see where former Hull FC reporter James Smales has it.
I think FC are going to be 6th.
I'm laughing, but it's a completely fair call. But who's
I think I've said to you before, when they play well, I really like the look of that FC team. I really like the look of them.
I agree.
They just don't play to that level enough.
Yeah.
But they'll get there, and they're missing a couple of key players as well that they'll get back.
Who's missing out then?
It's a really tough one. Because of the easier fixture run, I think I'm probably going to go Wakefield as well and have Saints missing out.
Right.
Which seems a little strange to say, because I was really impressed by St Helens and everything about that game against Leeds and what it stood for.
Saints also, if you look over the course of the season, have a favourable run.
Yeah.
So I like Will Price. I mean, Wellesby's out all season, isn't he? Regular season, Price is the same, so that sort of cancels itself out.
Yeah.
how long's Asiata out for? They've kind of kept it kind of sort of.
And the quiet, him coming back
It's gonna be a
will be
decent
key.
chunk, though.
Will be key for me for FC getting in there.
I think you can. You could pick any two of Wakefield, St Helens, and Hull FC, and it'd be hard to overly argue. I do think the top four are locked in.
Yeah, but none of us have got Warrington.
No, I just can't see it. I just can't
No.
see it. I don't see how they catch up to the rest of them. I just can't see it. I don't think they've just got that. Well,
they've got it in them if they play, but I don't think they've got the consistency in them.
Let's move on. We started off at Warrington. We don't need to come back and end. And I want to get away from the playoffs and talk about a few news items that have caught my attention this week. So the Kobe Rugler story, which is blowing up, if you will. I don't want to sound like I'm over-egging it too much, but it is quite a big story in the fact that Hunslet have basically come out and said Salford have tried taking one of our players behind our back for nothing. Flesh out the story for those that might not be aware of it.
Right, so Salford have signed Kobe Rugler, now on a 2-week loan deal from Hunslet. Hunslet have blown up about it because they say that there was a breach of compliance, that, you know, Salford had spoke to the agent first and it hadn't been the club didn't know till after a deal had been agreed between the agent and the player. There's then been a back and forth. I have seen the messages that were sent from agent to Paul Rowley, and they were offered Rugler twice before they made contact with Hunslet. It was an assumption that meant he was available.
Yeah.
Turns out Hunslet didn't quite know that. So there's been a bit of a break. I would put this down while storming a teacup's probably the right thing. There's been a bit of a breakdown in communication. I think Hunslet are within the rights to be annoyed because you do go to the club. At the same time, you know, the agent approached Salford, and so they were on the premise that it wouldn't be an issue. And let's be right, agents and clubs speak all the time before.
Yeah.
So I can see both sides.
Okay.
I think for a big story, it's been a bit of a storm.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about one big story that is a bit more than a storm in teacup. And you talked about agents. Is you did a special podcast last week with an agent with Graham Taylor talking about the Mark Aston situation. Just tell everybody that didn't hear the pod what basically came out of your discussion with Graham there.
A few bombshell revelations, weren't
and it actually was, you know, a bombshell as well.
So we now know that Mark Aston's ban is in place. He pulled out of his sports resolution team, and just the costs were going up and up. But Graham, who's been quite active in trying to help Mark during his case, claimed, and I've got to say I've seen documentation that validates this, that the RFL were aware that Matty Marsh was in the squad and couldn't play against Wigan in that Challenge Cup game, but nothing was flagged from their end, which does to me seem a bit. You'd expect the RFL would have been on that.
Which is, again, just to go back a little bit, just to explain for some people that don't understand the full Aston situation, that's basically what it all started off with.
He's been banned because Matty Marsh played when he shouldn't have done in terms of the HIA matters. And then he also claimed that there was a similar incident with a Super League club, but then the protocols changed and it was sort of not brushed under the carpet, but handled in a very different way. If been handled the same way with Mark Aston, he wouldn't have got the ban. Interestingly, cards on the table, I thought we might hear from the RFL off the back of us doing that. We've had nothing back from the RFL, which I find interesting. I would have thought they would have come forward. Yeah. I don't know what you thought when you listened to it. I expected.
I was expecting a
we've had
a reply.
So there you are. That will rumble on. I think Mark Aston will tell his story, and I think that could blow up even more. But
let's see where we get to on that story that you've done today, Stimmer, as we were joking about in the office. Joe Stimpson arriving at Castleford, and then the Renouf Antony going.
Tony, we practiced this.
Said
before.
Tony.
Oh, he said it right. Yeah,
I thought you said Antony.
Sorry, renew for Tony, going from
Oh, we'll have to watch
Wakefield
it
to
back.
Castleford. So two bits of news there. Talk to us about that. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about Stimo.
Your mate Stimo, arrives from Australia. I think he's been playing in the Queensland Cup this year. Previously with Melbourne Storm, Canterbury Bulldogs, and Gold Coast Titans. Featured in the 2018 NRL Grand Final for Melbourne Storm in their defeat. I think it was to Sydney Roosters. Just over 100 games worth of experience. Can play back row. Has been playing prop most recently. Can also play loose forward. Adds a bit of utility there. So we'll see if it's a good pickup. Obviously, he's played 100 games of NRL, the top tier. So we'll see if that's a good pickup. Certainly adds a bit of depth and experience to Danny Maguire's side. And he said he wanted a back rower, and he's got that now if he utilises them there. And yeah, Anthony.
Tony.
My
I'm
goodness,
only messing with
what
you.
am I dealing with?
Another piece of recruitment there. That Chris Chester's well underway, and we've seen obviously other people like Adrian Lam deserve a bit of credit, but we saw what he did at Lee Leopards, bringing in those sort of players, and building a sort of culture that in fact wants players to sign for you. So yeah, another piece of recruitment there, and adding to the forward pack.
All right, enough about this Anthony geezer. One of the stories that you did last week, Tom Whitehead going to.
So we talk about Warrington. I can't believe Warrington have let this happen.
Yes.
I accepted a bid from Hull KR. Makes sense for Hull KR. They need young
But it was a
lads.
really strange one, and I was speaking to Josh about this in the office earlier while, I don't know where you were, whatever you were doing, but I was saying to Josh, Sam Birch is coming out and he's saying, I'd like to get him in the team and I really like him. Get him in the team then, because this isn't a team that's ripping it up. So if you think he's worth a shot, give him a shot, and you haven't.
He's going to Hull KR.
Jobs for them.
We'll see. We will see if he's how it plays out. Makes sense for Hull KR. I don't think it makes sense for Warrington to lose the young lads because they've done so well with their academy players, bringing them through. You've got to give Warrington credit for that. They've put faith in him. Then they're letting one of the better ones go. Don't really understand it, but look, he's not done a lot yet. So let's not make out it's a wonderful signing for. We don't know. We'll see. But it seems odd on the face.
No,
of it.
but a useful addition because KR need them
Young
that kind
players
of
to help
young
the
age
salary
group.
cap.
Yeah. And last one, we don't really know where it's going to go, so not a lot we can sell it. We'll pick up on it maybe later in the week, certainly next week. Salford have got the HMRC meeting this week.
Don't even ask me, Smalesy, because I don't know. I can't. Everyone's gone to ground there. I don't know. Let's see what happens at the HMRC meeting. Hopefully, it's good news, but who knows?
Hopefully for Salford, it will be good news. We'll be back later in the week if we need to with an audio podcast, depending on what comes out of that. If not, we will pick up on it. Next week, we will definitely be back later in the week with our predictions episode, where we're sure to get 6 out of 6. That's nailed on. But until then, on behalf of myself and Josh, thanks for being with us, Matthew.
And above all else, enjoy rugby league. Take care.